And today we're going to talk a little bit about the wrestle that Yaakov have with the man or the angel. In this case, both probably, right? And we want to really see the accumulation of what takes place. This is actually a very, very important parasha. We want to dive in a little bit back to Parashat Toldot because it's important to understand at the birth of Ěsaw and at the birth of Yaakov, there's an accumulation that takes place. And that accumulation takes place today in this parasha today. And that's going to be as the last verse that we read today for this reading. It'll be in verse 29. And we're going to see something very beautiful. Hopefully, you had your coffees and you're awake. Because again, this is a very, very important message for not just people here. I believe an important message for everyone in general. It says in 25, and Yaakov remained alone, and a man wrestled with him until the rise of dawn. And he saw that he is not able to prevail over him, and he touched his thigh joint, and Jacob's thigh joint was dislocated in his wrestling with him. And he said, send me off, as the dawn has risen. And he said, I will not send you off, but if you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Yaakov. And he said, no more will your name be said Jacob, but rather Israel, as you have become ruler with the divine and with man, and you have prevailed. Amen. It is that last statement of this reading that is so vital and so important. Why? Because later in this parasha we read that Jacob arrived at Shechem, and the text in the Tanakh says that when he arrived at Shechem, he arrived whole. Meaning, Yaakov was complete. And we're going to see really like this wrestle that takes place in this parasha really is a synopsis of the life and the story of Ěsaw and Jacob. And it accumulates with, or it pivots to the point, it gets to the point of the ending where now Yaakov is whole, right? And he enters the Shechem whole. But what I want to focus today primarily is in the persona of Yaakov and Ěsaw. Why? Because here we see something very, very interesting. This wrestle with this individual that Yaakov is taking place. But before we do that, I want to give you a quick synopsis of the parasha, timeline of what we're looking at in here. This was actually, this reading that we're doing this week of this parasha, it actually takes place in a time frame of 2 years. Okay? Notice that each parasha is years. Actually, this is probably one of the smallest amount of years, 2 years. Normally, they're like 5 years and above for each parasha. So this is only 2 years. And the timeline, it starts from Jacob's encounter with Ěsaw, which we read today, all the way to his arrival in Hebron. That takes place all in 2 years. The mitzvot and observance that we learn in this parasha. By the way, each parasha I'm going to be sharing with you the mitzvot and again, observances that is teaching us through the Torah. What do we learn from this one? First of all, the prohibition of the sciatic nerve that we eat in animals. This is one of the basic fundamentals in the halachic ruling why we don't. You know, for those who are observing, well, this is food for thought for you. For those who are not, well, don't worry about it. At least it's good history for you. You know what I mean? Either way you look at it. So in here we see that in the marking of a grave by a monument, in essence. You know, this is where we see in the cemeteries there's markings, right? Where all this originate from? This is all biblical principles in here. We learn this in this parasha as well. This is the 8th parasha, of course, that we are covering in here, and this always happens in the month of Kislev. Now, why is this so relevant in the month of Kislev? Because in the month of Kislev is the month of what? Miracles. This is a good month. It's a month of miracles. You know, if you ever want to gamble with anything, this is the month to do it. Let's put it that way. It's a month of favor. It's a month of, again, of mercy, and it's really, really good. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into this. It says that Jacob remained alone, and a man wrestled with him into the rise of dawn, right? And it literally talks, it says, Vayavech ish imo. Literally in the Torah scroll, it says ish. It doesn't say that it's an angel. Later we find that it's an angel, right? But in here, talk says that there was a man that was wrestling with him. Many of the sages have different opinions on this, but I want to give you the most prominent one. Tanhumat Rashi, which is one of the most prominent commentaries for the Torah, says in here that this was actually Samael. And Samael essentially is a supernal minister, an angel that's a representative for Ěsaw in essence. And I don't see that actually as a stretch. We're gonna really kind of see in here how this actually plays out. And it says that he was wrestling with this man, right? It says into the rise of dawn. Now that's a long time. Anybody here wrestle? That's a long time to wrestle. I don't know anybody will make it that long. So there's something more to the story. It's the point that I'm trying to get at. We don't see here that it says into the rise of dawn. Why does it say into the rise of dawn? Why not into midnight? Why not till 1 o'clock in the morning? Why not an hour later? Why the Torah goes out of the way to mention that it was into the, because in here it's actually giving us the real meaning of what's really happening. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but the really message in here that is conveyed is the whole aspect that they did it into the rise of dawn. And in here, the Zohar actually shares something very beautiful concerning why they wrestle, quote unquote, into the rise of dawn. The Zohar continues saying this: the angel was from the side of judgment in this case. And the side of judgment has power only during the nighttime. Now, that may seem like a fantasy story, but please continue reading, because the whole aspect of night has a context in Jewish literature. When they talk about night, what does it mean to be night? The Zohar continues to say this is the time of the galut, the exile. In other words, the ministering angel of Ěsaw has authority and power over people during the time of exile. This is going to be beautiful because it says, as soon as the light of the day came up, that's why the man in here is saying, hurry up, let me go, because the sun is about to rise. Like, what is he going to melt? Is he a vampire or something? You know what I mean? Like, these are questions you need to ask. Why is he so worried about the fact that it's going to be day? As soon as the light day came up, his power was weakened, according to the Zohar. Actually, there's proof for this in the actual Tanakh. Why? Because it says this is what Jacob actually prevailed over him. And did we read this in 32:27? So Jacob was able to overpower him. It was then that Jacob realized that it was an angel of Ěsaw. Rabbi Hirsch actually brings something very similar to that understanding as well. Hirsch says, as long as darkness reigns on earth, as long as the consciousness of mankind is confused, for so long we will have to reckon with struggles in opposition. The spirit of Ěsaw, duly equipped with the orb of the empire, with this will Jacob have to contend until night wanes from the earth. What does that mean? This is, basically what Chazal is sharing in here. It's something very prophetic, that with the spirit of Ěsaw, which again we see in here, the wrestle took place throughout the night, which is the galut. When the light comes, what is that a reference to? The world to come, folks. When that light comes, that power that Ěsaw has will no longer be there. It's beautiful. And how do we know this is true? Why? Because the Zohar said so and Hirsch said so? Because we read about it in the prophets. The prophet says that the sons of the nations will come and bow before you. You're speaking in the context in there to the nation of Israel. Why? Because they're going to have to bring the offerings to Jerusalem, all this. You know what I mean? So all this is basically encapsulated in this very verse in here. Why the angel wanted to wrestle with him, but at daybreak, it was like, okay, you need to hurry up because I'm going to lose authority and power, basically, which is why Jacob actually overpowered him at that point, representing something very prophetic that will take place in the future. So what does he do? It says in here, because he was not able to prevail for him, he touched his thigh joint, and Jacob's thigh joint was dislocated. I want to share the Rashban on this particular verse in here. It says Jacob was planning to flee that night. Now, this is going to make perfect sense. Why was Jacob planning to flee that night? Because he was trying to avoid meeting with Ěsaw. Let me give you a little bit of background. Hopefully you read the parsha, but in here, what's happening is Jacob wants to make amends with his brother. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about this in just a minute before I get ahead of myself. But now he sends messengers, right? The idea is that he sends the messengers out, and what happens is the messengers come back and tell Jacob that, hey, your brother's coming with 400 men. So now he is very, very distressed. He's worried, right? My brother's coming after me to kill me. I mean, this is the reason why he's been gone for so many years to begin with, because his brother was out to kill him. And now this is what brings this whole aspect together, where now it's nighttime. Jacob is worried, and he's like, he gave it some thought. He's like, perhaps maybe I cannot overpower my brother, so I'm out of here. I'm going to flee. Rashban continues to say that he was trying to avoid that confrontation with Ěsaw. So God sent an angel to detain him by wrestling with him through the night and dislocated his hip so that he could not run away, in essence. And I think that's very, very profound. And I want to bring this more to a spiritual level, and also not just spiritual, but physical. How many times we try to avoid something in our lives, and one reason or another, God handicaps us. Maybe not physically, but he handicaps a situation in our lives that would stop us or prevent us from going a certain avenue. Has that ever happened to anybody in here? See? So this is kind of like what's happening. It's the same situation. And here Jacob wants to run. Well, God is just going to impede him from running. He's going to dislocate this from him, and then this is what takes place. The Midrash Rabbah, quoting Nachmanides, says, the angel of Ěsaw could not overpower Jacob, but he injured his thigh. What does he mean by that? This is another layer, okay? This refers to the harm inflicted on Jacob's descendants in the generation of the Shemad, they say. Not Shema, Shemad, with a D at the end. Okay, the Shemad, literally what that means is a reference of the time where the Romans were eradicating the Jewish faith, where they were persecuting the Jews. So there were other generations in which the same and worse was done to us. We suffer all this and persevered, as alluded to in the verse, and Jacob came whole. You see, what does it mean by Jacob came whole? We're going to see that in chapter 33, verse 18 in the Tanakh. It says that when he arrived at Shechem, he arose whole. Why is it that he arose whole? He was limping here. See? And that's the general meaning, is that through the galut, through the exile, through the persecution, through the shamad, we will persevere, we will overcome, and this is the aspect of all of it coming together in the parasha. So all of this accumulates to this whole point in here, and this whole point in here is you no longer will be said that you're called Jacob. Not that he will no longer be called Jacob, because we see that Jacob is mentioned all through Tanakh. So that's not really what it's actually saying in the text. It says you will no be said that you are Jacob, but rather Israel. You see what I mean? Why? Because you have become a ruler with the divine and with men and have prevailed. And this is the focus that I want to spend in here today, the actual outcome of what happened here today. So when we read that, what do we think? That he won the battle, won the fight, right? And now he has authority. And in part that is true, but there's an element in here that is missing that I want to be able to expound it so you can see it, hopefully. I want to first of all start off with, and here mentioning Shaloah, says once the angel of Ěsaw conceded the blessings to Jacob, the physical Ěsaw also made peace with him. And that's absolutely true, because what happened when he actually encountered Ěsaw? Ěsaw actually was willing to make peace with him. He didn't kill him, whether he was genuine or not, irrelevant. Point being is that there was somewhat of a reconciliation that took place at that point, but it took this wrestle with the angel to actually solidify that. So what happened with the angel, that became good, automatically that reflected in the natural, in other words. So now we have peace with Ěsaw, in essence, where now Esau is not out to kill him, at least not for this time in the season, right? The Malbim actually goes to an extra step with this. Malbim says Jacob's physical struggle with this nocturnal assailant was an enactment of the struggle that occurs within every individual. Now listen to this. This is very good what Malbim actually shares. The struggle between the Jacob and the Esau within ourselves. And this is the focus that I want to share with each and one of you, because this is actually very, very amazing. It's very few teachings actually moved me, and this one did, because I can see, teachings really become more personal when you actually live them out. It's one thing to see and, I believe in it, but when you actually have first-hand experience with something like this, it becomes so much more personal. So it says in here that this is a struggle that occurs between every individual, between what? The struggle of Jacob and Esau within ourselves. Between our godly soul on the one hand and our evil inclination of the material self on the other. The outcome of this internal battle determines the outcome of the cosmic struggle of Israel and Edom in essence. Even the most spiritual person cannot completely transcend the physical self, he says. Doesn't matter how spiritual you are, okay? As the soul, why? He gives the explanation. Why is it that we cannot transcend to such a level? It's because the soul needs the body in order to achieve its task in the world and to perpetuate. In other words, the soul without the body cannot accomplish much. You need to have the body also to accomplish what the soul wants. So it's a hand-in-hand work together. So it was this vulnerability that Jacob assailant tried to exploit. That's why he did what he did, to touch the thigh bone. In truth, however, this vulnerability is also the greatest strength. No other creation unite two such extremes, possessing both the soul, that is part of God, and the human self-deriving, which is physical. As Jacob's defeated challenger says to him, you have gained mastery. Now this, I love the way the Malbim puts this, which is more accurate and true to the actual what the Torah says in the text, in the actual Hebrew, not necessarily in the translation. It says you have gained mastery with the divine and with the human. By harnessing these two forces within yourself, you have achieved victory. What does he mean by that? This is where it becomes very, very interesting. Because now we have to go back to Toldot to understand and reconcile these two pieces together. Why is it that the victory he achieved is when he gained mastery of the divine within the human and being able to bring these two things together? Like, what does he mean by that? Because at a glance, when we read Parashat Toldot, right? In Parashat Toldot, we have the birth of Ěsaw and the birth of Yaakov. One states that one was a what? A man who dwelt in tents. That's Yaakov. The other, it states that he was what? A man of the field. That's Ěsaw. So when we read that, what do we think? Well, Yaakov, it's good. He's great. And Ěsaw, it's bad. Yeah, it's typical of the interpretation, to be honest with you. Here we got the guy in the yeshiva studying all the time. He's good. And then this is the guy who's a gold digger. You know what I mean? In so many words. Shame on him. But if I were to propose to you here today that the Torah is actually rebuking both. Meaning when it says that Yaakov was a man who dwelt in tents, who studied Torah, the Torah doesn't view that as good. But then when it says that Ěsaw was a man of the field, how about if I were to tell you the Torah doesn't view that as good either? Because what we have in the Torah is two extremes. See, that's what's happening with Ěsaw and Jacob. There's two extremes presented in both persons. And remember that these two personas are the two personas that are within us that we struggle with every single day. See, that's why the wrestle is so important, because I believe this wrestle even happens today. We still wrestle with the angel of Ěsaw every single day. The problem is we don't know what we're wrestling against. See, here's the problem, folks. If you get into a battle, but you don't know the battle and you don't know the fight, you're going to lose. You have to know what you're fighting. It doesn't matter how equipped you are. It doesn't matter even how strong you are. If you don't know what you're fighting or what you're fighting, it means nothing. Your strength means nothing. And I believe this is where this takes place. I want to present this understanding of Ěsaw and Jacob, because from this point on, Jacob changes. Not just because his name is Israel, but he gains mastery of the two personas. Something that today we're lacking, even for those who are, religious. And we see this in every religious group for the most part. So I want to take us back real quickly. I want to share something in here about Jacob and Ěsaw. Jacob-Ěsaw duality is interpreted on a number of levels by commentaries in our parasha. In the Talmudic and Midrashic literature, Jacob and Ěsaw represent the historic contest of Judea and Rome, the clash of word and sword that has defined the Jewish people's encounter with the Gentile world for millennia, in essence. On the other plane, Ěsaw embodies hedonism, in essence, which is self-seeking pleasure at all times, and violence and temporal world. And Jacob represents the spirituality and godliness of the eternal world to come. Pause there for a minute, because this is very important. Jacob represents the what? The eternal world to come. You ever heard of the terminology olam haba? Right, we say it all the time, but how often do we understand what we're saying? Because what is olam haba? Hey, we say the world to come, Richard. But what does that mean? Is that another dimension? Is that another location? What is it, the olam haba? What is olam? It's known as the world. But what is olam? And in essence, olam means a ruling system. Meaning that the olam haba is still this world, but it's this world that is guided and operated under a different regime, under a different ruling system. But what is the ruling system today? This is very important, folks, seriously. I'm going to give you an example, okay, what I'm talking about in here. In the Torah, I'm going to quote the Torah. So people that say, oh, well, he's just going on traditions. On the Torah, it literally states that if you follow the commandments of God, speaking specifically in here about the ladies, there will never be one barren woman. I'll be more than happy to point it out to you later if you want. Yet, there's barren women left and right. There's lots of promises that the Torah says that if you obey and you do, these will be obviously the rewards. Yet, you can do and obey all day long with it returning void. So either the Torah is lying, the Word of God is not really divine, or we lack in understanding. This is very important. Why? Because this will affect your faith. Something like this, folks, will cause anybody to run the other way around quicker than you can blink and say, this faith is invalid. As a matter of fact, there's many who has become atheists because everything that the Torah said, I don't see the produce of it today. Because we're not understanding Jacob and Ěsaw. We're completely misguided by something. We're expecting something that in reality is not going to happen. At least not now. So let me continue elaborating here so we can see where this is going. By the way, I'm not disvalidating the Torah, so don't be afraid. But what I am saying is we do need to understand where it belongs. That's very, very important. Because you don't want to put all your hopes on something that today is going to return back void. You need to understand your position today as a believer in the God of Israel who follows Torah, What does that mean? What does that look like? What do I do? What I don't do? Etc., etc. So just to put you at ease, we're not advocating anything bad. Heavens forbid. It's again, just steering the boat to the right GPS so that you can obviously get results and understand what your faith looks like. So continuing on in here, in our daily lives, the twin struggle and the conflict we experience when we move from the study hall, Jacob, to the marketplace, Ěsaw. From the sanctum of our daily hour of prayer into a day crowded by mundane demands and entanglements. Right? Internally, Ěsaw and Jacob represent the animal and soul and the godly soul within every individual, in essence. The self-bent of self-gratification and the self that strives to transcend and union with its source, which is God. Ěsaw is born first. According to the tradition, it says, yet aqob was conceived first. But Ěsaw is born first. So when it is prophesied in the opening verses of Toldot that the elder shall serve the younger, who is the elder and who is the younger? If Aqob is conceived first, but Ěsaw came out first, then who is the younger? It's a good question that they ask. The ambiguity runs deeper. On the day of Abraham's passing, Ěsaw sells his birthright to Jacob for a mess of pottage, right? Has Jacob now become the elder? Only maneuver himself into the subservient position? Or does Jacob now hold both cards in his hand and can now lay claim to both worlds? These are, again, questions. The same conundrum attends to the relationship between spirit and matter, in essence. Which came first, the heavens or the earth? Good question. Which one came first, heavens or earth? Well, it depends how you're reading it. If you go, for instance, in Genesis 1:1 to 1:2, it says that the heavens were created first. If you go to Genesis chapter 2, it says that the earth was created first. So which one is it? I'm going to be challenging a lot of you today, especially with a lot of doctrine. You know what I mean? This is what I love about this. Causes to move you out of your theological comfort zone. The Torah is not as black and white as we think. If spirituality is a vehicle for the divine self-expression and matter is a reflection of God's absoluteness of being, which is more deeply rooted in divine essence then? I told you needed to drink your coffee. Which is greater, the power to reveal or the power to withhold? Right? This question has no resolution in the Talmud's response to the query of whether light was created before darkness or darkness before light. Which one was created first? Again, depends on what part of the Tanakh you're reading or the Torah you're reading. You might find that both answers might be right. Right? So, Ěsaw is the fallen world of Tohu. Remember in the beginning it says there was what? Darkness, right? In the face of the earth. Tohu babohu, right? So Ěsaw is the fallen world of Tohu. Jacob is the reparative tikkun, reality born in its wake. Put another way, Jacob represents the tzaddik, right? Disciplined, righteous life. Ěsaw represents the potential higher for Shuvah. For Teshuvah. The tremendous goodness unleashed by the refinement of transformation and materialism and negativity. As a matter of fact, it says the place where the Baal Teshuvah stands, not even the righteous can stand, right? So in this analysis of the tug and war between Isaac and Rebekah, describing a parasha, and this part is really, really important. It's not over which of their two sons is the greater. The Jacob-Ěsaw dichotomy in its multifarious forms, spirit, matter, soul, body, mind, heart, and altruism, ego, is a close circle of priority and subordinates. in which each element is antecedent to the other and each serves the other in essence. Rather, what is the issue at question? Who belongs in the driver's seat? Ultimately, at the end of the day. One approach would argue that each should be master of their own world, meaning Ěsaw is the master of his own world, Jacob is the master of his own world. Yes, they both need, now listen to this, they both need and depend on each other. See, the thing is that we have always viewed Ěsaw as the villain, the bad guy, and Jacob the angel, the good guy. Reality, as a matter of fact, such doctrine has come out that there's some doctrine out there to say you need to hate an Edomite. You know what I mean? To that degree. And again, because they don't understand this. Each one of them needs each other. I'm going to give you the breakdown to this. Ěsaw and Jacob had the same parents. They were twins. They grew up in the same environment. They received the same education. So, what makes one better than the other then? Right? I'm going to continue on this in just a minute, but I just want to, again, get your mind to be thinking here. So even the most spiritual Sadiq requires the material resources that enable them to carry out their mission. In other words, what the Drash is presenting is that if you have a Jacob who is always studying, who is very righteous, who's preoccupied all the time with making sure that he's obedient or she's obedient, right? Who forsakes the ways of the world altogether, who does not want to be bothered with anything that has to do with material, because material is bad, how can that person survive? Can't. But here's the key. We read by the prophet in the Navims that a time will come where the righteousness of an individual will support them. In other words, a time will come in the world to come where the righteous doesn't have to get up to go work to earn a paycheck. Their righteousness will be the compensation. But in this world, if we depend on that righteousness to compensate us, we'll all be on food stamps. You see? You getting this? So, I hope you see where I'm going with this. The two. And how we can embrace both. And here it comes on to say, and certainly the man of the field, which is Ěsaw, needs the inspiration and guidance that only the spiritualist can provide at the same time. If you have an Ěsaw who all is about the material, what happens? He loses himself in the world. He's self-destruct in essence. Yet each twin recognizes the supremacy of the other in other's domain. In Isaac's view, the approach was tenable, he says. His rarefied vision saw Esau's immense potential, and he believed that with his blessing, carrying an infusion of divine influence from Tohu, meaning desolation, supernal source, the collapsed world could resurrect itself. This is why Isaac wanted to bless Ěsaw, by the way. Why? Because he saw the potential in what Ěsaw could do that Jacob couldn't do. Why? Because Jacob is too busy studying in the tents all day long. What can he do? See? But he saw the potential in Ěsaw, in essence, which is why he sought to bless him. It's not because he was spiritually blind, as many propose. You know what I mean? We always resort to spirit. Oh, you spiritually blind. It has nothing to do with being spiritual blind. He actually saw something that was actually genuine. And that's the reason why he decided to do that. Ěsaw could be made master of the material world, while Jacob is empowered to master the spiritual realm, each serving in his manner as a vehicle for the divine. Meaning, Both serve the same purpose. Rebekah, however, perceived that the very nature of Esau's volatile energies is that they cannot channel themselves. The redemption of Esau can only be achieved by painstaking process of engagement and rectification on the part of his younger twin. It is not enough that Jacob ruled the world of spirit. That's not enough. Jacob also must be given mastery over the material world as well. In other words, a Jacob who is just spiritual is useless. Can we prove that? Absolutely. Anybody recall, let's go to history. Anybody recall during the Second Temple period, there was one branch of Judaism that was called the Essenes. And what was their problem? Their problem is that they had a problem with the corruption in Jerusalem, according to the way they saw it fit anyways. They felt that the priests, the rabbis, and the scribes were all corrupted at the end of the day, and they want no part with them. They wanted to remove themselves completely because we are holier than thou. And what do? They literally remove themselves from Jerusalem and settle out in the desert. And what happened with that group? They died. It's unheard of today. They were so immersed in sanctification. They would do mikvahs 3 to 4 times a day. They were not even allowed to marry or to do anything because, that will defile you. This is what we call true piety. And they become so self-righteous that they say, we don't want no part of you, and they remove themselves, essentially. That's just one example of many that we see. We see it today in modern day, even within Judaism this exists. We have the extremes within Judaism, Satmar groups who are all to themselves in essence. And we see that nothing good comes out of this. People are just flocking out of those things. Once they're awakened and they see that they've been conned, they get out of there. They run out of there. This is primarily the understanding of Jacob and Esau, folks. And that's why I wanted to present this here to you today. So, it says in here, it is not enough that Jacob ruled the world of spirit, but he must also have mastery of the material world as well. Meaning, he cannot just be holier than thou. Jacob, for one, listen to this, did not desire that task, however. Now, this is going to get interesting now. Because the mother saw this. The mother saw that, you know what? You have to engage in the world. You have to be part of the world. You have to be involved in the material. Because what you're gifting and what you have, if you remain in the tent, there's no redemption for the world. So what did she do? It says in here, and this is very interesting. It says that Jacob really didn't want to do this. Well, how do we know he didn't want to do this? Because the Tanakh says so. Where does the Tanakh says that Jacob didn't want to do this? Now, this is going to be really, really interesting. We're going to go back to the Garden of Eden. Because you see, here's what's very, very interesting. Jacob was fighting with his mother, according to Hazal, because his mother had instructed him that he was the chosen one, that he was the one who was going to carry the blessing of Abraham, right? And that she needed to go, he needed to go, and he needed to deal very, very crafty with his brother so that the father can give him the blessing instead of Ěsaw. You guys remember that one? He went disguised as Ěsaw. This was all Mama's plans. He fought it all through. He didn't want to do it. You see? But I want to share more on this. This gets really interesting. So it says in here, his encounter, talking about Jacob, in his previous, it says in here, in his previous incarnation as Adam in the garden, it says, with the roiling passions of Tohu had resulted in catastrophe. He was perfectly content to cultivate his domain of the spirit and leave the material world to its own devices, essentially. It was Rebekah who in her previous incarnation as Eve had fallen prey to the cunning of the serpent. And it was instrumental in causing the cosmic collapse of Tohu, which is desolation. Who was determined to turn that same cunning on its head in essence, meaning she dressed her spiritual son in a materialistic clothes, put imitation game in his hands, and thrust him into the role of one who engages, masters, and develops the Ěsaw in himself and in creation. Meaning, Rebekah used the cunning of the serpent that caused the fall of mankind, the Tohu, decided that the way to get out of the desolation was to use the same craftiness against, in this case, against Ěsaw. Did it work? Absolutely. Because what happened? Isaac blessed him. Did he get punished? And please don't tell me that his exile is a punishment, because no one in Chazal doesn't say that. His exile was because his brother was trying to kill him. His exile was actually blessed. You guys remember that on the way of going in his exile, he stopped, and what happened? The sulam, the ladder, the promise that God gives him. Nowhere does it state that God was angry at what he did. Nowhere does it state, I'm punishing you because of what you've done. But rather, everything was instrumental and everything was calculated in order for this to take place. In other words, Jacob, who is the Tzaddik, it is what? Dressed in a facade as Ěsaw. What does that mean? Let me continue, and then I'll elaborate more. So, it says in here, she dressed in the spiritual son, materialistic clothes, put imitation game in his hand, thrust him into the role. Rebekah was convinced that the material world cannot be left to the materialistics people. Rather, it is the people of spirit who must achieve mastery over the material world. See, folks, this is amazing. Because we've seen this. I've seen arguments on this like you wouldn't believe, and amongst rabbis, I'll give you a name real quickly. Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro, you guys know Ben Shapiro. He's very influential. He's out in the politic world. He's out involved in things. You got some of these rabbis that are just downplaying him, who are just speaking lashon hara against him. And none of these guys are stepping outside of the yeshiva hall to make a difference in the world. Yet he is. As a matter of fact, in an interview, he says, I'm the only Orthodox Jew who's out here in the media with a kippah trying to make a difference. Thank you. I rest my case to the whole thing. I agree 100%. While the other ones are sitting there in the yeshiva pointing fingers, yet they're not making a difference in anybody's world. See? But this is the point of the teaching. Is that spirit of piety that needs to die, folks. More often, especially for many of us who came from a system of religion that taught that money is bad and that success is bad, and then seeking all these things as vanity, folks, there cannot be nothing further than the truth to that. And you'll be surprised that one day God might pull a card on you and you find yourself in a position of need, and the very one person that you were criticizing against for being materialistic is the one who's going to bail you out. That hurts, by the way. It says in here, it is the people of the spirit that need to do this. Not because spirit is greater than matter. Not because it's that. That's another misconception. Spirit is not greater than matter. They're both just as important. Why? Because you live on earth. God put man here on earth, not on heaven. Shamayim's another dimension. That's spirit. But you don't reside there. You see, the angels don't have to get up in the morning and clock in to go earn a paycheck. What do the angels do? They worship him all day long. That's another domain. That's another ruling system. You don't live in that ruling system. Stop trying to live like you live in that ruling system. But what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up broke and alone. See, this is very, and you're not going to make a difference, which is more important. How are you going to take Torah to the ends of the earth? How? How can you accomplish that? It says in here, not because spirit is greater than matter, but because in its present, unredeemed state, the material self is handicapped by the opaqueness of vision and confusion of priorities that only the spiritual connected can penetrate and untangle. And I want to share this in here real quickly. There is a message in here in 27:35, for instance. Chapter 27:35, it says, this is Ěsaw. He said to his father, bless me also, my father. And he said, your brother came with cunning, and he took your blessing. And I want to share in here what Shiloh says about that, because this is the part that we were talking about, what Rebekah did to disguise him as he was Ěsaw to the father so that he can receive the blessing. It says, a force can only be overcome by turning its own power against itself. This is actually mastering. It's actually true in the physical world that we live in truthfulness. The primordial serpent from whom Ěsaw draws his power was cunning. We see that in 3:1. So Jacob had to assume that very cunning, in essence, in order to wrest the blessing from Ěsaw. In other words, what the Shiloh is presenting in here is that just as the world became desolate because of cunning, cunning was the problem? Cunning was not the problem, believe it or not. See, his problem is terminology like this, it throws us off. Cunning was not the issue. The issue is that cunning was used for evil. See, and here, cunning is used for what? For good. I'll give you an example, folks. This is where, again, the pious unfortunately fall into this. You got people say, well, I will never lie. Never do anything dishonest. Heavens forbid if I do that, you know what I mean? If you find yourself in the future in one of these days, heavens forbid that doesn't happen, you happen to find yourself in the middle of the night, and Germans are knocking in your door because you have a tzaddik in your house. Are you going to tell the German, if the German asks, do you have the Jew in here? Are you going to say, yeah, he's in here? Go get him. Because heaven forbid, I don't want to lie. You're going to use cunning to do this. Let me tell you who else used cunning. Esther. Esther was very cunning in order to save her nation. You following this, folks? Cunning is not the problem. See, this is things that we have to change this mindset. That comes, unfortunately, from teachings that are not necessarily very kosher. Cunning is not the problem because why? Who is the ruling system of this world today? Ěsaw. Remember that. That means that if you don't work, you don't eat. That's the ruling system of Ěsaw. In the ruling system of the world to come, that won't be the case. In the ruling system that today is completely different. So where are we right now? We're in the ruling system of Ěsaw. This is why we find in this portion, what did Jacob do? First of all, two things. Jacob identified himself as Esau's servant, number one. Several times, not just once, several times. That's number one. Number two, he called Jacob my Lord. And if you feel that I'm not saying accurate, please read your Tanakh. It's in there. 3, he bowed down before Ěsaw 7 times. Why? When you look at this through the lens of this world versus the world to come, what does the tzaddik do? He submits. He uses the system of Ěsaw to accomplish righteousness. This is it, you see? No, none of that. Oh, I'm too pious for this. No. You're going to die, I promise you. As a matter of fact, I want to read this to you. One of the wisest of the wisest, King Solomon, elaborated on this topic. And I love it because King Solomon's words in here, in the interpretation of Hazal, is mind-blowing. I'm going to take you to Ecclesiastes. And the premises of this teaching today with Ěsaw and Jacob and understanding these two kingdoms and these two worlds and how we can benefit and extract from that to achieve greatness in this world cannot be overlooked. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 16 and 17, the wisest of the wisest says this. Solomon says, do not be overly righteous. Now, if anybody says that to you in the streets, you'll probably run. You probably say that's the devil speaking through that person. You know what I mean? But the reality is, this is an inspiration of God's word. It says, do not be overly righteous or excessively wise. But then it goes on to saying what? Why be left desolate? Hazal says that the interpretation for that is a person who is overly righteous and is always thinking that he is wisest and greater than anybody else and is always seeking for that wisdom, finds himself always alone. Why? Because nobody wants to be around a person that way. You ever met a person that they can never be wrong? And they're right in everything that they say? And that, you know, you walking around eggshells around them because, God forbid, you might insult them because, you know, again, the level of piety. But then it goes on to saying this. A person who does this is counterintuitive. Why? Because they're going to be left desolate. That's exactly what happened with the Essenes. They were desolate in the wilderness. And how is that going to be counterintuitive? Because the purpose of this Olam Hazeh that we live in, the sages say that this is a corridor to lead us to the world to come. In other words, if we're not harvesting and we're not doing our job to bring about, then in essence, we're not fulfilling our mission here on earth. In other words, we don't want to be the ones who don't want to roll up our sleeves and get dirty. We don't want to be the ones who are charged with, oh, I have the white garments, but I don't want to dirty them. And that's in essence the difference between Ěsaw and Jacob. You have to have both. There's got to be a Jacob in you. You have to capitalize in that Jacob. Not say, I'm going to rebuke this Jacob out of me. No, let me harvest that that Ěsaw within me. And let me do great. In the same way, you cannot go to the extreme with Jacob and say, you know what? God is going to provide for me. I'm just going to study Torah. And I'm going to live a life that is completely holy to Hashem. Be completely devoted to Him. And I know that the paycheck will show up in my mail. One way or the other. Or somebody will knock with a check for me. Right? That's fantasy. That doesn't get you to the world to come. All that do is leaves you desolate. God wants us to muster up the Ěsaw and the Jacob both and to bring him and unite him in the middle. To still be involved with the world. To still aspire for more. To not just be, oh, I just want the minimum and that's it and leave me alone. And in reality, in a nutshell, that's actually selfish. You're only thinking about you. And you can't bless nobody else. But it's very subtle because what it appears like. It appears like, wow, this person is so humble. Look at him, very, very humble. He lives in a cardboard box and he doesn't mind. No, that's failure. And that's selfish at the end of the day. Nobody can use you for anything. You can be a blessing to anyone, and you cannot help bring truly that redemption that the world is waiting for. And this is why this is so important. Solomon says in here, that's why Solomon says, do not be excessively wise and be left desolate. But look, verse 17 also connects with this one. Verse 17 says, be not overly wicked, it says. Notice the word, actually in Hebrew, it's master. They translate this perfect. It says, don't be overly wicked. It doesn't say don't be wicked. He says, don't be overly wicked. Why? It says in here, do not be overly wicked, nor be a fool. Why die before your time? In other words, if you are overly wicked, Chazal says that a person who is very overly wicked, God will take their life before time. So they die prematurely. But it doesn't say not to be wicked, but don't be overly wicked, meaning there's got to be a balance, folks. You know, the whole aspect of what Jacob did, or Rebekah told Jacob to do, in essence, when we look at that morally wicked thing, that wasn't right. But she did it for the different motives and purposes. See what I mean? That she did something that might have been morally not right? Absolutely. But what was the gain and the purpose for it? Most importantly, how did God view that? And how did God see that? You know, there's plenty. I mean, I cannot even have the time in here to mention all the different examples in Tanakh and how this is presented and how the people of God use this. The IDF does this all the time. Use craftiness, deceitfulness in order to gain control over their enemies. Does that mean that they're bad, that they're wicked? No, they're actually doing what Tanakh says we need to be doing. That's the whole purpose. So Solomon in here writes this, which then it testifies exactly to what this parasha is teaching us about Yaakov and Ěsaw. Look, the Zalman of Ladai says this. It was the cunning of the serpent in tricking Adam and Eve to eat of the tree of knowledge that brought about the collapse of the world to tohu, meaning desolation, and the scattering of its immense divine potential as sparks of holiness, buried in the material world. The only way to reverse, now listen to this is important, because everybody here wants to reverse it. Everybody has a different plan in how to go about that. But in reality, what Judaism teaches in here, that the way to reverse that primordial deception is with a counter deception. In other words, Jacob must therefore don the garments of his materialistic brother to obtain the blessings that will empower him to infuse the material world with godliness and elevate these fallen sparks, in essence. See? This is beautiful. You know, and the reality is, folks, if you want to take a message around the world, if you want to make an impact in the world, right? How can you do that when you're broke? What makes the world go around? It's okay. It's not a sin to say it. Money. Money makes the world go around. You don't have money, you stop. You're done. You run out of gas, you're done. You got no money for gas, you ain't going nowhere. The money's not the problem. It's why you want the money. See, what Chazal is presenting in here is that we harvest the money in order to bring about the redemption of the world. You know, many people wonder, wow, evil is so rampant in the world today. Evil is so rampant. But why is it that it's so rampant? Because evil is using materialistic concepts to reach out the world. That's why, you know, and you know, you get a multi-billion-dollar industry, trust me, you're going to hear about them to the ends of the earth because they got the resources to establish themselves anywhere, you know, and that's, Chabad is one of them. Chabad's one of the, you know, one of the things I was talking with Rabbi Green this week, it was just exactly about that. In Jewish outreach today, one of the issues in Judaism today is just no outreach. I said, how can there be no outreach? I asked him about the conservative movement. There's no conservatives don't do outreach? No, we don't engage in that. Chabad does. That's why Chabad has millions of dollars. Why? Because they're gaining the material aspect of this world, the Ěsaw, and they're taking this to the four corners of the world. That's why they got Chabad houses everywhere. Everywhere, just about. You can go anywhere and find a Chabad house. Why can we find good, and everybody knows Chabad. Why can we not find good rabbis with great teachings have the same impact? Why is it that they get to do it, but we can't? There's the answer. See, Chabad doesn't stop. It doesn't say this is enough. They understand this concept. And many in the world today, they're too holy to engage in something like that. We don't want to get involved with that. It's taken away from my time to study or whatever case may be, whatever excuse you want to put, we put that as an excuse. Meanwhile, the guys who are bringing bad theology and bad teachings are the ones who are prospering and the ones who are getting the message across. Same thing with, we take this to the Christian world. We all complain about those prophets that make millions of dollars and have airplanes and their teachings are going to the four corners of the earth. Well, how are they doing it? Because they're using this concept, folks. That's all. And it's proven to what? To work. Meanwhile, the other system is not proving to work. You're still sitting in your hole doing nothing. Right in your mind. That's it. But you're not moving. It's about movement, folks. This is why in here in the Parsha, Jacob ends with the saying that now you have found. And I love the wording in it. I want to share this one thing in here too. And this is Rabbi Dover from the Lubavitch Church says, ever since Jacob dressed himself in Esau's garment to receive the blessings of Isaac, there is an inherent duplicity in Jewish interactions with the material world. As Jews, we present ourselves as fully fledged participants of physical life. We act as if we eat because the food is tasty, do business because we want the money. We act like it. Pursue professions, become great lawyers, accountants, high-profile careers, business owners. We act like we're pursuing profession because there is where our ambitions lie. But in all its facade, for in truth, we regard the physical existence as but a means to a higher end. That's the reality. We don this disguise to engage a world that is all surface, whose very definition is that it is a shell that obscures its own inner truth. But in our moments of truth, when we break away from our material involvements in order to pray, we know that our interests in the dew of the heavens and the fat of the land is only to utilize them to serve our Creator. In other words, purpose for why we do what we do is so that we can serve our Creator, so that we can further the teachings of Emet, the teachings of truth. The Jacob and Ěsaw, folks, saga is an important aspect that we all need to learn from. And this is why in this parsha, and I will repeat in here, it states in here, in the final aspect of this, but you have become a ruler with the divine and with men, and you have prevailed. Meaning Jacob now understood. That's why it says, you have became now. Jacob is no longer just a guy sitting in the yeshiva, being holier than thou. Jacob now understands the mission in this kingdom, Esau's kingdom, and how to utilize Esau's kingdom in order to further and bring in the divine world. And this is something that all of us need to adapt, folks, to move forward. Being holy is great, folks, but there will be a time for that. Right now, we have a job to do. Right now, we live in this world. We don't live in heaven. We don't live in the world to come yet. It's not here yet. You can keep Torah all you want all day long. Doesn't matter how much Sabbath you keep. Doesn't matter how halachic you walk. It doesn't matter. None of this is going to bring in the resources that you need to move forward. None of it. In the world to come, that'll be different because the prophet teaches that it will be. The world will change. The kingdom will change. Jacob will be the ruler now. See what I mean? And Ěsaw will serve him. You see what I mean? As opposed to the other way around. And that's why in the life that we live right now, in the kingdom we live right now, we need to be wise and we need to be able to engage in life and be more active and more willing to be involved in the things of life today, as opposed to becoming a hermit and straying away from everybody. And just, I just want to study Torah and that's it, and pray and that's it. I mean, these are great things, folks. But if you do it prematurely, it will backfire at you. See what I mean? Again, I'm not proposing that we don't study Torah. Let me finalize what I'm not proposing. I'm not proposing that we stop studying Torah. I'm not proposing that you violate the Shabbat. Heavens forbid. What I'm saying is that when Shabbat is over and we engage in the week, let's engage, folks. And again, I'm not speaking necessarily to anybody here. I'm saying this is a problem even again in the Orthodox world today. This is a problem in religion, period. From one denomination to another. This is a problem all the way around. There's a lot of zeal in religion. I think we all can agree that. There's a lot of zeal. There's just not a lot of discernment. Zeal without discernment is very dangerous, extremely dangerous. You have to have discernment. You need to understand this. You need to know that today, Ěsaw is the government ruling system. That means just like Jacob, we are servant of Ěsaw. And we will use Ěsaw within us to accomplish the things that God needs for this world to be transformed. And this is the reason why Rebekah did what she did with Jacob, to dress him like Ěsaw in order to be cunning, and he got the blessing. And this is why it is important in here in this parasha, as Jacob wrestles with this, every single day, folks, we wake up, we wrestle with Ěsaw and Jacob within us. Don't push Jacob away and don't push Ěsaw away. Marry them together. That's the key. Marry them together. It's a beautiful, beautiful concept. And we'll see a lot of success. We'll see tremendous amount of growth, movement, things taking place, moving forward, always looking to what is better for the body as a whole. Not necessarily what is better for me, but what is better for the body as a whole. How can the body right now, Torah believers, how can they benefit from this? The Torah says in Isaiah that it needs to reach to the ends of the earth. And it's not just a Bible going to the ends of the earth. It means the walk, the understanding, the teachings, all of it has to reach to the ends of the earth. And it needs to be demonstrated by what? By our halakha, by our walk, and how we do things. So may this be an inspiration for each and one of you to harvest the Ěsaw and the Jacob together. Stop pushing Ěsaw away. Stop looking at Ěsaw as the evil guy. He's not the evil guy. He's not the bad guy. He's not Haman. You know what I mean? Exactly. He is the part of you that needs to awaken. And it is a challenge. It is a huge challenge to juggle holiness and secular. But this is the calling that we need to do for this time in this season. May Hashem bless all of you. Thank you, guys.